Good evening. Welcome to the Chenango Forks Board of Education special meeting, February 24th, 2021. Will the clerk please conduct roll call?
Amy O'Brien.
Here.
Spiros Tomatos.
Here.
Mary Collins.
Here.
Michael Vavra.
Here.
And Lynn Lockwood.
Here.
We have a quorum. I call this meeting to order.
I, Erin McMullen, Board Clerk, have confirmed with Council that this meeting is being held in compliance with Executive Order 202.1, issued by Governor Andrew M. Cuomo on March 12, 2020. The Executive Order suspends Article 7 of the Public Officers Law to the extent necessary to permit any public body to meet and take any action authorized by law without permitting in-person access to meetings, and authorizing such meetings to be held remotely by conference call or similar service. This meeting is being held remotely via Zoom virtual meeting software. The public has the ability to view or listen to this meeting live via the Zoom app, web browser, and/or by telephone. This meeting is being recorded and will be transcribed at a later date.
Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. 2.1 Superintendents Report.
Thank you, Mrs. O'Brien. We have a presentation that Mrs. Kazavinsky is going to do on the elementary, and the entire report is on the feasibility of bringing back students K through 5, 4 days a week. After Mrs. Kazavinsky does her report, I'm going to do the last slide. Then we're going to open up to questions to the board first, and then do public comment for the entire audience. So I believe Catherine's presentation is probably about 10 to 15 minutes long. We're gonna let her do that uninterrupted, please. And like I said, we'll take board questions, and after that, we'll take public comment questions. Okay. Mrs. Kazavinsky, I believe you can have the screen now.
Thank you. Good evening. Today we'll be talking about increasing to 4 days of in-person instruction. And we have a little motto at CFE, and it is CFE is the place to be. As reported in at the last board meeting, we wanted to provide you with our COVID case summary. As you see here, we have wrapped this up a little bit, little less detail than we had the last time, but condensed it for September, October, November, December, and January, February. In the first column, you'll note that we have the number of positive cases. The second column, the number of students quarantined. In the last column, the number of staff quarantined. And this is from when we opened school to date now. As already noted in our last board meeting, the school reopening guidance, the district has been obligated and still is obligated to follow two different sets of guidance. This guidance in particular is the New York State Department of Health and the New York State Education Guidelines. These guidelines have not been updated in regards to guiding schools and operating during COVID-19 pandemic. While there has been some clarification on some of the content, they have not overall been updated. 6 feet is still recommended distance for social distancing. However, proper barriers can be used when that's not possible. In Chenango Forks currently, we have masks. They remain a requirement at all times except during mass breaks, and meal times. So why transition now? One of the most important things we need to share with you is that we have heard your voices. We've heard your feelings, your thoughts. Everyone wants to be heard, and we have heard them all. The range of feedback, and we want you to know that we have heard you. So not only have we heard you, but to put a little bit more of information behind this, we want you to know that the data has shown that schools are not the primary means of transmission in the area. COVID numbers are declining in Broome County. Vaccines are being made available to our faculty and staff. Warmer weather is coming and we'll be able to open windows, provide more airflow within the buildings, even though it may not seem that way right this very moment. But we are looking forward to warmer weather. High-risk contact sports have restarted, and we've learned from experiences of the other districts. Along with that, we know from our continued research, not only as a school, but as a district, that schools are not coronavirus super spreaders. In addition, as I've already noted, that transmission is generally low in schools. So how are we going to do this? The primary layer of protection for COVID-19 is actually the mask, and that's what we've been utilizing. And one of the secondary barriers is actually the use of a barrier. And at the elementary school, provided we are able to move forward, we're utilizing barriers on the student workspaces. It's important for us to note that we'll need about approximately 600 barriers, and these barriers will cost us about $30,000. We wanted to provide you with some examples of what these look like. We appreciate the Union Endicott School District providing us some of these visual examples for us of what a pod example would look like in possible a table setting, and then an individual station setting. We also wanted you to note that we currently have the health and safety precautions obviously in place, and we use anywhere from 6 to 12 feet social distancing at all times throughout the school day. If you're not familiar with the 12 feet, we use that 12 feet in particular in physical education and in our music classes as well. We do masking at all times except during mask breaks and meal breaks. We sanitize and hand wash frequently throughout the day. We do temperature checks, bi-weekly student health affidavits, daily health affidavits, and we do have thorough cleaning of all spaces in the evenings. So what are the changes going to be? The barriers will be used when a 6 to 12 feet social distancing is not possible throughout the school day. There'll be no longer be able to be a 6-foot distancing on buses, and then all other health and safety precautions will remain the same. So this is currently happening at CFE and will remain the same. So our full remote classes will continue to be offered. School will continue to begin at 8:30 a.m. for our full remote students. In-person students will arrive at 9 a.m. and school will officially start at 9:30. Free breakfast and lunch will be offered daily to all of our students. Remote food pickup will continue on Wednesdays. Pre-K will not switch to 4 days in-person instruction due to it being on a different overall structure. Parent drop-off and pickup will remain in the same model, but adjustments will need to be made. And Wednesday will remain full remote day for all students. So what are changes due to the increasing in-person instructional days? In some cases, classroom teachers will change for both the remote and hybrid student. For example, grade levels that currently have 2 remote teachers may go down to 1. Students who are opting to remain full remote will change to the other remote teacher. Students from current hybrid classes may be required to change teachers for newly established in-person classes in order to balance class numbers. We understand that this may not be particularly ideal. However, this is the way that we can accommodate coming back in person for 4 days a week. A change in classroom teacher will also could affect our special area teachers in PE as well as the recess time. Due to increase in class sizes, the number of students required to quarantine due to positive cases is likely to increase. As we know, this decision always comes with a risk. When a student is in quarantine, their daily access to instruction will be different than in our current model. We wanted to provide you with our current class sizes, So you'll see obviously on the far left here, or my far left actually, of the grade level, the hybrid in-person class sizes currently, and that's for our A and B day students. So if you're looking at kindergarten, for example, maybe 6 students on the A day and 6 students on the B day. Then you're looking at the class totals. That's if you're combining the A and the B day students, and then the number of full remote students. That's our this is currently what this looks like. Now what we wanted to do is show you our projected class sizes. This is based on the responses from our parent and guardian survey. This is subject to change. So for example, again, you have the grade levels, and then the next column, you have the 4 days of in-person class sizes, as we already noted in the last slide, and the number of full remote students. Obviously, again, this is subject to change, but we wanted the board and the community to have an understanding of what the changes would look like. So on transportation, we've had some questions in regards to transportation. And on the buses, we won't be able to fulfill the 6 feet distancing, and the shields are not possible on the buses. So as we look at the bus numbers, the buses are projected to have between 9 and 27 students. And if there's a positive case on the school bus, obviously more students would be required to quarantine. Our parent pickup has been going overall pretty well, but it will need to be adjusted to accommodate the higher numbers that we have to date. Parents should expect a longer wait time when picking up and dropping off students. And then we'll have to put in newer parent pickup numbers. They'll be assigned to all individuals who are doing parent pickup. So our next steps at CFE is that if the board approves, the transition will start immediately with the following. By March 1st, parents and guardians will need to contact me in regards to the response in the most recent survey if it's no longer accurate. On March 8th, class lists will be adjusted based on the results of the parent guardian survey, and changes in teachers will be communicated to families. By March 10th, any further guidelines or essential information will be provided to families. March 12th, updated transportation information will be provided and new parent pickup numbers will be assigned. On March 15th, all in-person students will return for 4 days of instruction. With that being said, we know whatever decision is made, we know it will have an impact on all stakeholders. And we ask for your unwavering support as we go through perhaps another challenge as we face our next steps. With that being said, to the Board of Education, I appreciate your consideration in this matter. I recognize that you are tasked with a decision that is quite challenging. As I shared with Chenango Forks Elementary today, I will share with you. I leave you with this quote before Dr. Peck takes on the presentation, is whatever course you decide upon, there is always someone to tell you you were wrong. There is always difficulties arising which tempt you to believe that your critics are right. To map out a course of action and follow it to an end requires courage. I know you have a courageous decision to make, and whatever is needed from CFE, you have our support. And I will pass this on to Dr. Peck. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you, Mrs. Kaczynski. The next steps after the elementary, what we're going to do at the March 11th board meeting is Mr. Rulo and Mr. Daniels are going to present what 4 days of in-school instruction will look like at their buildings if we could do it after spring break. The decision to move forward with the middle school and high school will be contingent information from the elementary school's transition. So we want to look at K through 5 first. If everything's going well in K through 5, we are going to present on March 11th if we can do the same bring back of the 4 days a week in the middle school and the high school. So that's going to be our next board meeting about 2 weeks out from now. Next questions, any questions? And again, I would rather take questions from the board now, and then we'll open up to the public for public comment. So with the 5 board members, Mrs. O'Brien, Mr. Vavra, Mr. D'Amatos, Mrs. Collins, Mrs. Lockwood, I'd like to open the floor to you 5 for questions for myself. We have all three building principals on. We have the director of operations on. We have the director of transportation on as well to answer questions.
All right, I guess I'll go first here. I just want to say thanks to the admin and teachers and everybody in the staff. You guys did a great job coming up with this plan. I really think it's a good plan. My first question I got is, what is lunch going to look like in elementary? Are we going to be able to accommodate having all these kids back in the cafeteria?
Mrs. Kaczynski, I'll let you take that one.
Catherine, I can answer it if you'd like.
Thank you, Hannah.
Mr. Vavre, yes, we can accommodate everyone in the cafeteria. We're using they're still going to be 6 feet apart, but we're using middle of the seat to middle of seat, and that's allowed us to fit in a couple more tables. And so really at this point right now, I believe we only have to add 2 tables on both sides, our K2 side and our 3-5 side, to be able to accommodate full grade levels.
Perfect, great. Like I said, the plan is really good. I am glad that we can see if we can get these kids back, especially K-5. The only other thing, I had a thought here. I don't know what the rest of the board thinks or the admin. Instead of waiting the 6 weeks for the middle school and high school, now I'm fine with that, but I was wondering, is there any chance we can bring the seniors back around the same time we're doing K-5? Because I got 2 reasons for that. One, let's try to get them a pretty end of the year, normal year for them. And also second fold, kids that are struggling academically might be better getting the 4 days in person, helping them making sure they're, passing their classes to graduate here. That's just a thought I had here. I'm all for K-5 coming back. I was just wondering if, instead of waiting 6 weeks, could we at least get the seniors back around the same time we're doing K-5? Just a thought I had rumbling around my head the last 2 days here.
And Mr. Vavre, I did discuss that with Mr. Daniels today, and Mr. Daniels is on, and he's going to take that question.
All right.
Dave, if you're speaking, you're muted.
There you go. Okay.
There you go.
I would love to get the seniors back, but I think we need to be judicious about how we do this. For one thing, I think we need to consider the fact that with the overlapping spring sports, now we're going to have a lot of kids, more kids are more congested, and the potential for spreading the virus increases some. So I think it'd be wise to wait a couple more weeks after around the 15th, beyond the 15th, to be certain that in fact we're not going to see a spike for one component. Okay. Secondly, it's going to take more planning for in the high school, additional planning in the high school. You mentioned cafeteria. Right now, we can seat 70 kids in the cafeteria. We're going to have to get that to close to 100 or more if we're going to be able to use our cafeteria facilities. I also want to try to bring in the high school kids and maintain that 6 feet distancing if I possibly can. And so that's going to take some planning to know how many classes I've got to make special accommodations for to make certain that I've got 13 to 14 kids max in a classroom to maintain our 6 feet distancing. And we still had a number of parents who have not responded to the survey, and that makes it hard for us to make decisions about where those kids are actually going to be. So, by the end of the day tomorrow, we should have, hopefully we'll get most of our surveys back, and we'll be able to make better decisions going from there. So yes, I'd like to get the seniors back, but I think we need to proceed judiciously. From what I've contacted my colleagues, other high school principals, right now, UE was the only one who said they're planning on bringing back kids, and they're waiting till 29th of March to do this. So I think we want to be cautious of how we do that so we don't put kids at risk too. So I'd like to, we're working on it.
Thank you, Dave.
I have a question. Do parents have a choice after this? What they choose is it for the rest of the year?
Yeah, Mrs. Collins, yes. That actually came up in the elementary meeting today, and Mrs. Kaczynski spoke to it, and I backed her decision. And again, with Mr. Real and Mr. Daniels, we can't keep flip-flopping back and forth. It's just too hard on the admin. It's too hard on the teachers to keep moving the kids back and forth. So this next decision will be their final decision for the remainder of the school year.
Okay.
I've got a question on the pods and the picture. It obviously it depends on the grade level. Are we going to have the pods? I saw that picture was illustrated. Will they be, if the kids are like in separate pods, let's say if they're back to back, is that distance going to be 6 feet?
Yeah.
Yes. All right.
What it's going to look like in the pod that you saw in the picture, there's 4 students at the pod, but the goal is to put those pods 6 feet apart.
Okay.
So the 4 students won't be 6 feet, that they'll be in the pod, but pod 1 to pod 2 will be 6 feet, pod 2 to pod 3 will be 6 feet.
Okay. All right. And we're confident we can do that. I mean, I know our rooms aren't that big, but you're confident you can do that with the numbers you expect to come back to get them all in the same room.
Speaking of Mrs. Kazavinsky, I believe we are confident we can do that.
Okay. One more thing. Let's say, you know, assuming that the board approves this plan, and I'm speaking from personal experience because I have a daughter at Brockport, and COVID cases have gone absolutely nuts today, and I know they're going nuts at BU. Let's say between now and then, I expect if COVID cases take a sharp jump, you're going to come to us and say, hey, wait a second. I mean, have you guys discussed that at all? Or are we doing this no matter what if we approve this today?
We have not, Mr. D'Amato, but I believe once the school board puts this, if you do approve it tonight, it's an addendum to our original plan that we presented back in the fall. And we would literally have to come back to the board to have a vote to stop going forward. And I think it'd be too much confusion for our teachers, for our admin, for our parents, everybody to put the brakes on and go backwards. So
I mean, I'm not, you know, and I'm not saying that everybody's been devastated by COVID, and I absolutely want to move forward. But at the same time, I see colleges that are getting close to 5%. And this isn't happening in the last couple of days. I mean, this is, you know, last week I wouldn't have brought this up, but I mean, I'm talking about yesterday, BU, today is Brockport, tomorrow, who knows what it is. They just suspended SUNYAC. They paused it for a week. BU just canceled the season. You know, I don't know if a parent commits to coming back and then in 2 weeks, all of a sudden COVID cases go nuts. How are we going to deal with that? That's my question.
I think I have 2 answers for you, Mr. D'Amato. One, I think college is very different than elementary school.
Yeah.
I know having three, you know, 1 daughter and 2 sons that went through college and they all played college sports. Their intermingling is very different than a 3rd or 4th grader, obviously. So I'm not sure that what's happening in college is indicative of what would happen in elementary school, where the parents have much more control over what they do individually.
Right, except the kids come home and then all of a sudden the household is quarantined. I just want to make sure that we have the flexibility to adjust on the fly. I guess that's my concern.
Again, to go back to the question answered, Mrs. Collins, we would prefer this would be your last decision, and we're going to stick to that. If there's extenuating circumstances, as in any case, we would look at that. But it just in the normal cases, this would be your last decision. But as we work as school administrators from the day that COVID started back almost a year ago, that we went fully remote, we have always looked at extenuating circumstances, and sometimes you have to, you know, take those into account. But because you want to switch, that's not going to be allowed. Again, if something's going on in your life and you talk to the administration and there's something really extenuating, I'm sure we would be, you know, willing to make that change, but not as a rule.
Okay, thank you.
Kind of to go along with Spiro's, if someone is quarantined, what kind of instruction do they have access to?
I'll let Mrs. Kazavinsky talk further, but go back to remote instruction. Do you want to give any more details, Mrs. Kazavinsky, on that?
Thank you, Mary, for the question. So just wanted to, just in full disclosure, we had asked our grade level coordinators for some feedback about this. We wanted to get their input on this, and we're gathering that rest of that feedback, and we haven't made a definitive decision. I can promise you this, though, the decision will be in the best interest of all stakeholders for sure. When I have that decision, I'll be happy to pass that along to Dr. Peck so he can share that with you. I apologize I don't have it this evening.
I didn't expect you to, but I thought you might have an inkling, so no problem at all.
Current model, because it says that it'll be different than the current model. So what's the current model?
So the current model is dependent on, honestly, the situation. Everything has been really situational. So if the teacher is quarantined with their group of students, they've been able to work with, let's just say a teacher gets quarantined with the A-day students. And so they'll work directly with those students on that A-day, one-on-one. Obviously, they're not able to come to school on the B-day, so we have a substitute come in to help instruct the in-person students. And so there's many varieties of this. I won't bore you with all those details, but hopefully that gives you at least a brief understanding of what's happening.
Yes, it does.
Great questions. A lot of my questions were already asked and answered. I do have one pertaining to the cost for the barriers. If we could address where that's going to come from.
Mrs. O'Brien, that will come out of the general fund. That will not take away from anything that we currently have in our budget. Right now, the district is running a budget surplus for the calendar year, but that was anticipated and that was something we planned and wanted to do. So what would happen is we would take that money out of that general fund and it would not be at the end of the year to roll over into the 21-22 school year.
Thank you. And just to reiterate that 30,000 for the barriers would only accommodate the elementary, correct?
That is correct right now. And we again, and that could vary either way by 1 or 2, 3 or 4,000. We basically roughed them out at $50 a barrier. I mean, there's barriers out there for $22. There's barriers out there for $150, depending on what kind of barrier. Obviously, you don't want to go the $150 barrier, $100 barrier, the $22 barrier we saw. You don't want that one either. It's literally flimsy and a stiff wind's going to blow it off your desk. So we're trying to go somewhere in between, middle of the road, for the simple reason COVID's going to go away. Knock on wood, it's going to go away. And what are we going to do with these barriers once it's over with? So we're trying to look at something that can get us through the next 4 months, basically. So we think the middle of the road barrier that we selected, and that's the price range, will do well.
Assuming barriers are effective, I would also assume that they could be used to help reduce the spread of the flu. Because I remember in previous years seeing class sizes dwindle because of flu. Correct?
You could use barriers for anything. I'm not going to pretend I'm a medical doctor and tell you how effective they are. I mean, you're going to still have to wear your mask. You know, Mrs. Kazvan was very adamant in the presentation that all kids K through 12 will still wear masks. The barriers are meeting DOH standards. It says 6 foot and or barriers. So if we don't do the 6 foot, we're doing barriers. I'm not going to pretend to tell you that I honestly believe barriers are going to stop too much, because you're going to breathe around the barriers. We have high school kids that are going to breathe over the barriers. I'm thinking of your children. Your children are tall. They're literally going to almost look over the barriers. So I'm not going to lie and say I think the barriers are going to be super effective in stopping any germs going.
Agreed.
The DOH says it's 6 foot and or barriers when 6 foot can't be maintained. So that's why we're doing the barriers. If we did not do the barriers and we did away with the 6 foot, then we'd be totally out of DOH compliance.
Right.
Dr. Peck, at the last board meeting, Dr. Nash and our school nurse, and I think she represented all the nurses, were not in favor of this. Have they changed their mind with the barriers?
I have not spoken to Dr. Nash, but I have no reason to believe that he has changed his mind. And I have spoken to Kara Zimmerman's our lead nurse. She's our middle school nurse, and she may be on tonight. I have not looked in the audience. There's 200 and some people, and I believe she would tell you she has not changed her mind.
Okay.
But we're going against the recommendation of the doctor and the nurse.
Correct, Mrs. Lockwood. If the board votes to approve the plan that we presented tonight, it would be against our school doctor and our school nurse's advice.
But we'd be within the guidelines the Department of Health and the state has set for us, which I'm presumably are doctors making that decision, nurses that create these guidelines. Okay.
Correct, Mrs. O'Brien. We would be, and again, going back to the shields, that's where the 6 foot slash, literally 6 foot slash shields where that's not possible. So yes, in DOH guidelines.
But this is, all right, so again, so we'd be in the Department of Health guidelines, but we'd be out of the CDC guidelines, correct? Because the CDC is still saying 6 feet.
I believe so, Mr. D'Amatos, but again, we don't have to follow both. As long as we follow the DOH, we're okay. And again, I know have done this. I know Windsor's done it. I know UE has
Okay.
So, I mean, it's hair splitting at this point. I mean, it's a, I think
I got you.
we said it earlier, it's a gut wrenching call on behalf of the board to say, yes, go ahead or not. We want students back in school. We listened to the survey. We gave the survey to the parents. Overwhelmingly, I shared the survey with the school board. The school boards all saw this survey at the elementary, middle school, and high school level, and parents want their kids back in school. And this is the best effort we can do to put the kids back in school, meet DOH guidelines, and keep them as safe as we can. Still, the masks are there. I think the key is we still have the mask. I'm going to go on a limb and tell you, Mrs. O'Brien, I don't know how safe the barriers are. I would never say barriers and no mask, obviously. The masks are still the key. Students still need to have those on at all times.
Why do you feel it's okay to go against the recommendation of Dr. Nash and the nurses now, as opposed to before when we got their opinion for closing the school, like around Christmas time?
I believe we have a lot of pressure on us as an administrative team and as a school board and as a district to bring the students back. It's what the community wants. End of the day, we work for the community, we work for the taxpayers. And I've heard, and I know the school board has heard over and over again from community members and large groups that they want their students back 4 days a week. And we did the survey to see what the parents had to say. And it came back overwhelmingly. Ms. Lockwood, you saw the survey and you saw what the results were of bringing the students back. If we don't bring the students back at this point in time, we're going to be one of 2 schools in the Southern Tier not to have our pre-K through 5 back. The other being Vestal, and I've been actually in contact with Vestal, and I know they're looking at bringing back their pre-K, their students as well. I'm not going to say what grade. I'm not sure what grade they're looking at overall, but does it make me nervous? It absolutely makes me nervous, 100%. I mean, if we were confident that this was going to work and we knew what we knew now in the fall, we were brought them back 4 days then. I think going back to the slide that we worked on, Mrs. Kazafensky presented, we know more now than we knew then. The vaccines are coming out. The warmer weather is coming out. Schools aren't super spreaders. We know that now. Things we didn't know in the fall when we put this plan together. We were really, no one in the state of New York or United States of America put a reentry plan together that's ever done it before. I've been doing this in education for 23 years. Administration for 16. I've never put together a reentry plan before. Mrs. Kazavinsky's, Mr. McDermott, Mr. Rule, all been in education a long time. We've never put a plan together like this before. So in the fall, we put together what we thought was the best plan for our students at the time. As more information has come out, we have tweaked it and we've listened to our community of what they want. And that's how we got here tonight, Mrs. Lockwood.
I have another question on the frequently asked questions you put out on the web page.
Yes.
One of the questions was, why is the district considering a 4-day learning model as opposed to a 5-day schedule?
Yes.
And would students learn remotely on that 5th day? You said students will attend remotely on the 5th day, but they will not be receiving instruction. Is that correct?
We're keeping the same models we currently have on the 5th day, which is Wednesday. Right now, that gives us a chance to meet with our teachers, to meet in department meetings, and gives our teachers a chance to meet. Going forward in the future, if the 4 days works out, I know we as an admin team have spoke about bringing us back on that 5th day as well. But right now, the 4th day, which is Wednesday, is going to stay like, I'm sorry, the 4 days back would be Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and Wednesday would stay the same for now. But that's something, Ms. Lockwood, as we go down the road with this and see how things work, that we could ultimately hopefully change that and have them back 5 days a week.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify so that they are going to log in, but it's not going to be an instructional day. It's going to be exactly like it is now.
Correct.
Okay. I mean, I have to say, I would love to see the kids come back. I do share some of Spiros's concerns about if we have an outbreak, then what happens?
Ms. Lockwood, that's a very real concern. I know in the presentation, Mrs. Kazawinsky's covered it, that quarantine will go up. If you're going to bring back double the students on the days, your quarantine numbers will go up as students quarantine.
One thing I noticed in the guidelines, like, so if you're in a classroom and you're at one side of the classroom and the kid that tested positive was on the opposite side of the classroom, does the whole classroom really have to quarantine or not? Like, who I'm assuming the health department
Yeah.
drives that. When you say you're working with the health department, they are telling you who needs to quarantine. Is that correct?
Correct. When we get a confirmed case from Broome County Health Department, the administration, the principals, they do what's called contact tracing with the DOH. And there's a set of guidelines they need to go through. It's quite extensive. Mr. Rulo and Mr. Daniels, Mrs. Kazavinsky will tell you they spend hours and days on the weekends doing contact tracing. Mr. McDermott as well, because buses come into play. And every time you get a positive case, and we get an update daily from the DOH from Victoria Perkins, who's our liaison, and that contact tracing, and the principals, you can shake your head when I say this, it is taking them 8 to 12 hours in some instances, probably minimally, to contact trace. And again, when you get a staff member involved in that, and especially a staff member who moves amongst classes, if you remember, we had the elementary at one point, we had, I want to say, a little over 20 staff members out because of the contact tracing of where they went back and forth and came in contact with one another. So it's very cumbersome on the district when we do have a positive case, because that contact tracing will take Mr. Rulo or Mr. Daniels or Mrs. Kazavinsky out of their role of being building principal for the day. And they will literally spend the entire day watching film and watching tape of where this individual went and who they interacted with and for how long. And,
Right.
and luckily our district has, I think, 260 working cameras at this point. So we really can see where students went and what they did. But contact tracing will take more of our time. Quarantines, like the presentation said, they will go up. And again, and that's why we're starting with elementary, because what's going to happen in middle school and high school is they move between classes. One student can literally come in contact with 90 other students in the high school and middle school, where in the elementary, they're more classroom-based concentrated. So if you just take, Mrs. Smith in the second grade, someone in her class has COVID, and we do the contact tracing, it's probably going to take out that entire classroom. If you take, Mrs. Smith in the ninth grade, and there's a student in there who's traveled to Mrs. Smith and Mrs. Jones and Mr. whoever, you could take out a much larger base of students. And I think that's the reason when you look at most schools, you'll see that their K through 5 is in person, but their middle school and high school is not in person 4 days a week.
All right. So maybe I missed you saying this. So if the whole class is going to be quarantined if one kid in there has it in the elementary school.
More likely than not. I can't tell you that concretely because it's going to have to go through the contact tracing, but I would say more likely than not, that's exactly what's going to happen. And then depending on where that class goes, because they're still going to do specials, they're still going to do art, they're still going to do PE, you can also take out additional teachers and aides that way as well.
Right. So
Anyone
you're saying that you have to watch video and see like if student A and student B within the same class ever cross paths? And if they didn't, possibly that student wouldn't have to quarantine?
It's more time sensitive.
Yes.
And actually just crossing paths, how much time they spent with one another.
Right.
So a lot of video, because again, when adults have been quarantined, we'll say, who were you around and how long? Mr. Mouse, so I was around Mr. Vavra for 5 minutes. It's not a big deal. We'll go back and watch the tape and he was around him for 25 minutes. He's not lying. He just doesn't really remember how long he was around him and he's not paying attention at the time. I got to be honest, when I'm talking to people in the building, I do 5 minutes and walk away. Literally, it's like a 5-minute conversation. And if we're done, we're done. If not, we'll finish it later. And Mr. Daniels is smiling because he knows that. I mean, we don't spend a lot of time together just for that reason. So when you go back and start looking at tape, some people think they were together for 2 or 3 minutes and they were actually could be 20 or 25 minutes. It sounds kind of funny when I say it, but it's actually the truth. And again, if you come down with COVID on Friday and you start the contact tracing before, you don't really pay that close of attention what you're doing all day Wednesday and Thursday in a lot of cases. So a lot of time, our SROs have watched the tape. Mr. McDermott's watched the tape, Mrs. Kazavinsky, Mrs. Elwin, Mr. Rulo, Mr. Daniels, Mr. Sturvant, secretaries. I mean, I can keep going and going. It's quite a process when we have to do the contact tracing.
Right. But also on that same note, so if a teacher is at the front of the classroom the majority of the day and the student who tests positive is someone that sits near the back of the classroom, then potentially that teacher wouldn't have to be quarantined because they never were in contact with that student for however many minutes or no, or shaking their heads no. Okay.
No,
I just want to clarify so
no,
people understand, because I did have a parent ask me about,
Right.
if
I
they're
was
far enough
only
away, does it matter?
Let me be a little bit more definitive. If you're Lynn Lockwood and you're teaching second grade and you have a COVID positive student in your class that's tested positive, you're taken out with your entire class. How's that
Okay.
for a definitive answer?
All right, that, yeah,
I was trying to leave some wiggle room there, but I don't think I can.
okay, good. That's fine. I just want to clarify that for the public, that it's going to take out the whole class.
And it could take out your art teacher or your PE teacher or whatever
Right,
in that classroom,
right.
or special, if there's a special ed teacher or anything like that that comes in and out. And then that special ed teacher who comes in and out, if they're going into a different classroom, that could affect that classroom as well, depending on if they test positive.
It also happens in the lunchroom, Lynn, like, and speaking with the DOH, they kind of draw a box around the student, and anyone who falls within that box would be quarantined as well. And that, because it's a grade level that eats at one time, it could be members of their class, but then it could also be members of other classes, one or two, from other classes who were just in that range of that student in the lunchroom.
Gotcha. One other question about the input from the nurse and the doctor. Did we ask them if there was anything that would make them more comfortable with this, or do we know? I can't remember if they mentioned anything when we consulted with them before of what they felt would make them more comfortable.
Aaron, is Mrs. Zimmerman on? Can you see her in the crowd?
Let me look.
No, Catherine, shake your head. No, you don't see her. I didn't even, we have 225 participants. I didn't even try to go through all of them.
Dr. Peck,
Yes, Mr. Rillo.
can we add to the
No.
conversation though that New York State is saying they're going to update their guidance to follow the CDC recommendations that a fully vaccinated person 2 weeks after their second dose, if they're exposed, won't have to quarantine any longer unless they're symptomatic. So as we continue to move down this path with some of our staff, that will help our staff members that are choosing to get the vaccine and able to get the vaccine.
Right. And I think it comes down to that, Mr. Rillo, who is actually getting the vaccine and when are they actually getting back? I know we have some teachers that still are not scheduled till the end of March for their first dose. I know we have other faculty members that are fully vaccinated.
So like percentage wise, how many teachers in the elementary school are vaccinated?
Lynn, I can't hear you.
Do we know percentage wise how many people, what percentage of teachers in elementary school are vaccinated?
No, that would be a HIPAA violation at this point, in my opinion. On my meeting today with the DOH, though, apparently they are going to start gathering how many people are vaccinated in each school district, but I'm not really sure how they're going to do that without having names attached, because once you attach names, I believe it's going to be a HIPAA violation. So I'm kind of waiting to see how they're going to do that to ascertain how many teachers in each district are quarantined or not quarantined, vaccinated.
I'm going to violate my wife's HIPAA rules, but I know that she signed up, tried to sign up the first day. I don't think she could. I think she got in the second or third day, and she, I believe, is like end of March. But it was very spotty on people that were logging in, couldn't get on the website, kept crashing. This was early on. So I don't know. Some people are getting in earlier. Some people are getting in April. I know, because I have a restaurant workers that can get in, and it's funny because some people will get in the same day and then other people will get in an April date. So it's kind of all over the place.
What it is, it's if you've ever bought concert tickets and you're trying to get really good tickets when they come out, you go to the site and you continuously click the refresh button. And when someone cancels their appointment, it'll pop up, but you literally have about a 3-second window to grab it. And Mr. DeMalis is right. I've seen people get it the same day or the next day. And I've seen people have to wait till the end of April or beginning of May to get it. But it's literally a lottery that you need to stay at your computer and just keep clicking refresh in order to sign up.
And kids can't get it now at all. I mean, unless, I don't think kids can actually, if you're under 16, you can't get the vaccine.
No, not yet.
I heard too that if you go to the site at the end of the day, if there were people that didn't show up for their appointments and they have extra vaxes, you can just get in line and get a vax. If anyone has the time to do that, just hang out there, see if you're lucky or not.
That Mrs. Lockwood, I can neither confirm nor deny, but I do know the other way works because there's a member of my family who was 2.5 months out and continuously clicked and went from 2.5 months to 1 day out. And again, that's probably the best way if you have the time to sit there and continuously click.
Oh, I had one more question about, we originally, I think at one point there was a plan originally about doing a staggered start where we were gonna bring back like a couple grade levels at a time. But did we decide that it was better to just bring everybody back at once, or?
Yes, in talking to Mrs. Kaczynski, and I think the words we used was rip the Band-Aid all off at once. And I don't know if that's a educational term we can actually use, but again, bring them all back. March 15th is coming. If we staggered them, we're going to do March 15th, March 22nd, March 29th. Then you run into April break, and it's going to be too confusing. So we might as well just do them all at once, K through 5. But yes, Ms. Lockwood, you're absolutely right. We did have a plan once to bring them back K1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, we put enormous amount of time into this plan. Again, much like the reentry plan, we've made several plans that have been scrapped and redone. It's not something that you know, we lightly thought of and it's off the cuff. We have very long admin meetings, 2 hours, sometimes every other day, sometimes every day, depending. And again, we're trying to take all these things into consideration: the money, the safety, the education, the community, the teachers, the board. It's very taxing and weighing. But again, this is the best solution we've come up with to date. Is it flawless? Absolutely not. And again, with COVID, I haven't seen anything that's flawless yet. But we believe that we can do this. We can bring our students back, but the trade-off and the risk is going to be, just like what's going on at BU right now in SUNY Rockport, that there may be more COVID cases and more people may have to quarantine. Before we do public comment, and I know Mrs. O'Brien, public comment's not next. You have a little something under the president's report, but if it's okay with you, just go right into public comment.
Sure.
Okay. Any other questions from the board before we go into public comment? And I expect the public to have quite a few questions, obviously, and we're probably going to take some time to answer those. So, okay. I think we're all set, Mrs. O'Brien.
The public wishing to speak to the Board of Education will be allowed this period of time to do so under the following guidelines. The public wishing to speak to the, speakers will be limited to a maximum of 3 minutes and the entire public comment session to a maximum of 30 minutes, which may be waived by a majority vote of the board. Speakers are requested to raise their hand. They'll be called on in order, with everyone having a chance to speak before someone is allowed to speak a second time. We ask that you clearly state your name. Speakers will not be allowed to personally attack any board member, administrator, or any of the public present. Also, no comments by the speakers will be permitted that deal with executive session subjects, such as individual personnel matters, discipline issues pertaining to specific individuals, including students, and speakers will not be allowed to read letters. Questions will be answered at a later time and posted on the webpage. So we have Jennifer Hershey.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So my concern was with the comment that this is against the CDC guidelines. So if we look at the CDC guidelines put up on .gov for operational strategy for K through 12 through phased mitigation, it breaks it into blue, yellow transmission rates, right? And as far as I understand, Broome County's in blue. It says the recommendation is K through 12 open for full in-person instruction, physical distancing of 6 feet or more to the greatest extent possible. But then there's a footnote that says if this physical distancing of at least 6 feet among all students, teachers, and staff within a class, cohort, or pod is not possible at all times, schools should ensure physical distancing between classes, cohorts, and pods, which seems consistent with the recommendations the principal has put up. So why are we saying that these recommendations are against what the CDC is recommending when it seems completely consistent to me with what the CDC is recommending?
That's a good question, and thank you very much. There's so much information out there, and there's so much confusion. And again, I agree with what you said. But what we've been following all along is the DOH and the 6 foot. So again, and that's why I referenced earlier, and I think Mr. D'Amatos brought up the CDC, but the DOH clearly says 6 foot and or barriers. And with the barriers, we are within our rights to bring back our students under that. And that's really what we're going off from.
Okay, so that's consistent with DOH and CDC, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Hi, guys. I'm sorry if I missed this. I did miss the first couple minutes. But I'm wondering if you mentioned any plan for bringing back at the middle school level, any of the kids that are really struggling hard with the online learning.
We are going to look at the middle school and high school in much more depth on March 11th, but I will let Mr. Rulo speak to that. I know we started to bring back some students. I think they're mostly special education students at this point, but Mr. Rulo, would you like to address that?
Yep. Yeah, so Mrs. Merrick, at this, we have a plan in place where we've brought back 6th grade special education students, some 7th grade, and 8th grade is on the docket for next week. So at this point, that's our plan, and then we'll address, more students on March 11th.
Okay, so they have to be special education students.
That's the New York State regulations and guidelines. That's what they promote for school districts. If you're unable to bring back all students, that you need to look at certain populations of students first. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Dennis Roby?
Good evening, all. I got 2 points. Was there any thought put to continuity? You've seen the plan seems to change all the teachers for all the students. And I know I used to be a teacher, and there's a certain relationship that's built up, and now that's going to be, gone, and you'll start anew. So that's a point I think, I don't know if you took it into consideration or not, but continuity with the same teacher for the time you're there, I think is important. And you seem to have changed it for hybrid and remote and everybody. The other point I wanted to make is space seems to be an issue. And I've already heard from Dr. Peck that you don't believe those barriers are really going to contain the virus. Any thought be looking into the community for empty spaces where you could spread the school out, like that Texas Music Hall at the Plaza, that maybe you could stage classrooms in there with the amount of distancing that would be possible? That's it.
Two very good questions, and I'll answer them both for you. One, we're not trying to move students from teacher to teacher. We're going to keep our students with the teachers in every possible instance we can. I believe Mrs. Kazavinsky said in some cases, depending on class size, students may have to be moved. But right now, it is our intent to keep every student with their current teacher as long as possible with the current class sizes.
Oh, that's good. Okay.
Okay, to answer your second question about spreading out, we just simply don't have the staff to do so. If we do that, then we're going to need more staff. What some districts did that spread out, and I can speak to this because I've talked to the superintendents, they've taken their staff, such as their AIS, their RTI, special ed, reading teachers, and they repurposed those teachers as classroom teachers, which allowed them to spread out. We in the district, and I think I spoke to this at the last board meeting, we did not do that. We left our AIS, our RTI, our special ed, our pre-K. Some districts canceled pre-K for the year. We left all those teachers in place to reach all those students to make sure they had their needs met. So to spread out, we would need to have those places supervised. We'd have to have some type of administration there supervising. We'd have to have teachers there. We'd have to have aides there. It's just a simple mathematical equation that we don't have the people to spread it out. We're very different with our footprint than other districts who've already have 2 or 3 elementary schools, maybe 1 or 2 middle schools. We have one campus, as you know, everyone on this call knows, we have one campus with an elementary school and across the way, the middle school, high school attached. We just don't have that footprint to spread out or the personnel to do so.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Mr. Roby.
Eric Daniels?
Yeah, I just had a statement that I'd like to make. I heard a lot of what ifs during the board questions.
Eric, we can't hear you very well. Is there a way to adjust your microphone?
Is this better?
Not really.
How about now?
Just go ahead, Mr. Daniels. I'll do my best to hear you.
I just said that there's a lot of what ifs that came from the board questions, and you could what if anything to death. So I think that we should follow what the community's decision was and open the schools. That's just my personal belief. So that's it.
Mr. Daniels said, thank you for that. And that is in part why we're presenting tonight. Also, just going back to Mr. Roby, it dawned on me, and much like, conversations you have, you think of things later, to switch out to other parts of the campus and to go off campus with classrooms, we'd also need SED approval to do that. And that's something I don't think at this time we could even, attain in time to do that. So that's another reason why we can't spread off campus.
Eliza Moore.
Daniels for that statement.
Mrs. Moore, can you unmute yourself if you're speaking? Okay, I will. Oh, there she is.
Did it unmute?
Yep, we can hear you now.
Sorry, it wouldn't let me unmute. I had two questions. I know we had talked about there being an issue in the high school with the cafeteria not being big enough. I was wondering if there was a possible alternate location, like maybe some students would be able to eat in the library or maybe a different room to accommodate that. My other question was, it seems that the principals are spending a lot of time doing the contact tracing. Would it make sense to hire an additional staff to cover that so that our principals can actually be principals and are not taking that on as an additional responsibility, since it seems that it will be becoming more of a burden to them?
Very good question, Ms. Moore. First of all, we are looking at, I know I've talked to Mr. Rulo more than I've talked to Mr. Daniels about it so far about the middle school. We're looking at utilizing the middle school library and computer labs for lunchroom to actually space the students out. Once we start delving in more into the middle school and high school plan, I'm sure that Mr. Daniels and I will have conversations about how to spread those students out as well using those spaces. As far as having other people do the contact tracing, right now it's been administration for the simple reason they are the head of the schools. This is very crucial, very important. They do get help from, like I said, the SROs, our dean of students in the high school, I believe our secretaries also help do that. But right now, everyone in the district is taxed to doing what they're doing. The teachers are doing their teaching, and the aides are doing what the aides need to do. So like much of everything, at the end of the day, it falls back on the administrative team to get things done. And again, we've all worked very hard to get to the point we're at. And yes, we would like more help, but to bring in outside people to do this or to reallocate what we have is just not feasible at this point in time.
I think that's a brilliant suggestion, to bring somebody, and I'm not trying to make it all about money, but to bring somebody in at a far reduced cost, specifically just to do contact tracing, to me, makes more sense than using our more expensive resources, our admin, who are already probably darn near close to burnt out. I'm assuming. I could be very, very wrong, but I think that's a brilliant suggestion, one I have not thought of. I don't know if anyone else in our board has thought of that, and I think it's worth looking into.
Okay, right now it says Amelia, but if you could state your name.
Hi, it's Christine Webb. We share a computer at home. Sorry about that. Thank you very much, everybody. Principal Kazvensky, your presentation was awesome. I really appreciate you going above and beyond, not just for the presentation, but for everything you guys have done for our children. Your teachers and your faculty and staff have been exceptional through all of this, and I thank you. I have just a couple of questions that haven't been talked about. And number one is the CARES money. I am assuming we're going to be slated for some more. I looked on your website. I don't see any, maybe that can be shared with us, but I don't see the allocation of CARES funding from our first CARES Act relief. I know that there's another one on its way for school districts that could possibly help with those barriers and getting them into the high school. That's a big thing for me, but also what about sharing the survey? You mentioned you shared it with a board. Are you planning on sharing that with the public in any way? Because again, as a board, you know, you guys are what ifing us pretty hard, and I thank you for it. That's your job. However, your job is also to represent us. If the numbers are overwhelming, if you're what ifing us to death outside of what you represent and vote with what you choose, I think we need to make sure that we're voting on the citizen here and the children. And I do value 1000% if we go back that we have to take care of our teachers and their safety. It should be a priority as well as the children, obviously the children and this obviously, and prioritize those teachers who need to stay home because of their underlying conditions or their family conditions. I value that, but I really think that choice needs to be made available for the parents who want to choose to send the children back 4 days a week. The problem is we never get a choice, as Dr. Peck mentioned, like all of the other schools in our demographic and in our color that we are in our district. So thank you again, all of you guys. Thank you again for all you do. And again, representing us as members of our school district.
Mrs. Webb, thank you very much for the comments and the question. Let me bring Mr. Petrino on, who's our business manager. Aaron, he's not on the screen right now, but can you bring Mr. Petrino on to talk about the CARES Act a little bit for us? And while you're doing that, I will answer your second question, Ms. Webb. At this point in time, we did not make the survey public, and I personally don't plan on making it public right now. It was very overwhelming that the parents did want the students back, and I think that's why we're having this conversation tonight. And I did allude to that when I spoke about the board having the survey earlier. It was very overwhelming that the parents did want their students back 4 days a week. And Aaron, can you find Mr. Petrino in the audience?
I see one Mark. If that
Mark
is Mr. Petrino, if he could raise his hand.
We are getting CARE Act money this year. We have already allocated that into our budget. So I believe a board member had asked me this question earlier via email, and I instructed to that board member that CARES Act will not help pay for this $30,000 onto the shields, but that is something we are getting back into our school budget. And I think Mark is on now. He can go into more depth with it. If that's Mark, hold on. He just texted me.
Yeah, the CARES Act fund money was not extra money. It's actually state aid.
It was offset, correct, Mr. Petrino?
What's that?
It was used to offset, not to add to.
Right. State aid was cut. And in order for us to be whole, the CARES Act funds were distributed by the governor to make the district whole from the loss of the state aid. So it wasn't really extra money. It was just money that we needed just to run the normal operations.
And that's why earlier I said that 30,000 would have to come out of the general fund. Again, Ms. Webb, thank you for those questions.
This speaker has RLS.
Hi, it's Becky Scales. Sorry. First of all, I appreciate all of the work that you guys are doing, and I understand the contact tracing because I do contact tracing myself, and it takes hours. Here's my concern. 2 times that my daughter was quarantined in the middle school. The first time, it took 3 days for us to be contacted, not by the school, but by the health department. The second time, we never received a phone call. We never heard from them at all. It took Kara to send me an email the day before they were able to return back to school. So you guys are putting all these hours in, and parents are hearing from the school, but we are not hearing from the health department. Have you heard that from other parents?
That happened to me as well, twice.
Yeah, we have, and we have to do our job as a school district and do that contact tracing, report it to the health department. And I can't speak on behalf of the health department. I have no power or authority to do that, obviously, but I believe it's just a matter of being overwhelmed with the amount of calls they need to make with the amount of personnel they have. And you're not the only person, like Mrs. O'Brien said, Mr. D'Amato shaking his head. We've had known of people who've been in quarantine for 8 days and they're coming out of quarantine and they still haven't got their DOH call yet. And that's not that uncommon. So, but that doesn't alleviate the pressure on the district to still do the contact tracing. We still have to do that. And we still have to report it. And then a lot of times we make our own contact. Like you said, Carrie contacted you and let you know what's going on. So again, I don't have any authority to speak for the DOH, but I believe it's just a simple numbers game of how much you can do in a day with how many people.
Right. So that's why I'm saying I appreciate that you guys are putting all the time into it, because the communication's coming from the district and it's not coming from the health department. So I just wanted to see if other people were having that issue or if it was a kind of isolated thing with us or whatever, and to thank you guys.
And I think that goes back a little bit to why the admin are doing it, or at least overseeing that the contact tracing is we want to make sure we get this right. And we want to make sure that that's done correctly. And no one cares more about their buildings than the building principals, that the teachers, obviously about their classrooms, but overall as a building, that is their primary job. And I really believe that them doing the contact tracing is the safest way to make sure we do it right. And again, I know it's a great burden on them. It's a great burden on all of us. But again, it goes with a job. And with COVID, we've all taken on additional responsibilities at this point.
Sorry, I just realized I was not muted. Sorry if anyone heard me printing. I had a question related to the issue of the high school and the middle school students. And I understand we're bringing back the special education students, but if for some reason, I mean, we have at least another 4 weeks or more before high school, middle school start coming back. If for some reason that's delayed, or even in the meantime, are we also looking at like other high-risk students, like other students that are really struggling with being home and bringing them back?
Right now, Ms. Lockwood, we're only concentrating on the special ed population. And again, we really hope that if the board agrees to our plan tonight, that the K-5 goes well enough that we can start to bring back the entire middle school and high school population after spring break. Once the windows are open and there's a little more ventilation, again, that the problem with identifying those students is what's the cutoff? What's the criteria? And then if we decide to bring back your student and not Mr. DeMaus' student, is there some type of discrimination in who we brought back and what reason we brought them back for? Also, are you targeting certain students by bringing them back and saying you're low performing, so you get to come back? Or I'm looking at Mrs. Kazavinsky's high performing, Mr. Rillo's high performing, you don't get to come back. So there's something called FAPE, and what that is you have to have equal education. And to start choosing who to bring back, I don't know.
I don't know that it would necessarily be us, the administration, like choosing per se, but I mean, if a parent identifies that their child is in crisis because they're at home, maybe they're not completely failing, or maybe they're, maybe they've had to get help, they're seeing a therapist or something like that, and the therapist recommends that they really need to get back into school to turn things around, something like that situation where we have like a student that's really desperate and needs to get back in there.
If that was a board, I would have to meet with legal and actually figure out how to do this with a legal way without violating FAPE, and to make sure that we brought these students back with some type of equity. So that's something that again, if that's a board directive, I'm more than happy to look at that. It has to be equitable on how we do this, because what's going to happen is you pay the same taxes as Mrs. Collins pays, and your student's back 4 days a week, hers isn't. And it could get sticky in that situation. I'd really want to talk to legal before I did anything.
I can understand and I can appreciate that. But at the same time, I think it once we get all the special ed kids back, I think it's something that we do need to look at, even if we do have to bring legal into it and figure out all the
I agree.
legality. And I would think that as a parent, I mean, some children are thriving in the remote environment and love it. And some children, based personality, environment, whatever, they're just not, for whatever reason, are not. So, and I don't know that those parents are, all of them reaching out to the school or not either.
You're absolutely right, Ms. Lockwood. We do have some students who they're actually doing better with the remote learning than they were doing while they were in school. And then we have the other students who are going the opposite way. So you're absolutely right. I don't think a lot of people actually realize that we do have a lot of very successful remote students right now. Is there any more questions from the community?
Yep, there's one more right now. It's Mrs. Webb.
It's me again. Hi, I would really love to know the statistical increase versus decreases. Is there any way that we can do a grade distribution pattern over the past few semesters to see year over year how our grades are doing? Maybe for our middle school and high school students, perhaps, to see what the difference is quarter one, year 19, quarter two, year 20, year one. 19, 20, 21, quarter one. I mean, you know what I'm trying to say, in a grade distribution pattern or something, because, granted, I value that the opportunity for remote learning is working for some children, but it's not just about the academics. It's also very well-rounded. Can we do some kind of study or have some kind of grade distribution patterns? Middle school would probably be the easiest because they're numbers. Obviously names have to be taken off, but can we look year over year for quarter one, quarter two, quarter three for the past few years? And let's see how it's really working, because we can't compare it to the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. Obviously, that's not going to happen. We're in a different, we can't compare pandemic to pandemic, but can we see how it really is affecting academically?
Ms. Webb, thank you for the question. I don't know how feasible that would be for my administrative team to do at this point in time. That would be extremely, extremely time consuming. What we do have from year to year is our New York State report card, which has our regencies, our graduation rate, and our state testing in elementary and middle school, and that's usually what we use for comparison between year to year. I don't even know if they would be able to go back by quarter over the last 3 or 4 years. And if you're looking at comparing remote learning, we've only really been in remote learning for one calendar year. Basically, March 13th last year was D-Day when we went into remote learning. So I'm not really sure what that would tell us overall. But if you want to gauge of how the school does year to year, our school report card's online, and it's found at the NYSED webpage, New York State Education Department webpage, and it's on our line at our webpage as well. Did that answer your question, Ms. Webb, or no?
I mean, I'm not 100% sure. Don't you guys enter your grades via computer software? We don't have a computer person on hand that can just analyze that data?
The grades are all entered by teacher, not by administrator.
And they are saved for how many years? They can't be just done, put on a spreadsheet and hit into a pretty pie chart?
I don't have anyone in district that's able or has the capacity to do that.
Is it possible that we can engage BOCES to help us with that, like you do with our budgets?
There's got to be a way if we establish a report card, right?
Yeah, we have a school report card, Mrs. O'Brien, that we publish every year.
Yeah.
Again, I don't know, Mrs. Webb, if the work would be worth the payoff in that situation.
Well, it would certainly help to see the numbers, regarding those successes versus those, the data plots, the successes.
Right, but we've only been remote for one calendar year. So
great. We'll start quarter three last year to we'll start quarter three to quarter three, 19, 20, 21.
That would be much more feasible than going back 2 to 3 years.
Uh-huh.
I mean, that is something that our admin and our teachers could probably do.
And I don't want to necessarily put on the teachers. Maybe that's something that we can engage some, BOCES in or something.
There's some kind of reporting with school tool. I mean, is school tool what we're using?
That's what I was thinking, Lynn. Isn't there some kind of reporting quarter one to quarter one?
It's in a database. Isn't there some kind of reporting that comes along with school tool for getting that information out?
I would
it's
have
not
to
apples
check.
to apples, though. You got to remember when we left, like in March of last year, a lot of the kids, I mean, things didn't count. It was 2 weeks. If you remember that board meeting, I think that it was discussed by the admin that basically we were supposed to be gone for a couple of weeks and kids were going remote. And I mean, if you go back to last March, I think the first several months, things didn't count. I remember other districts didn't even start learning right away and sent home letters like after spring break. So, I mean, I think the numbers would be, you could come up with all sorts of statistics and numbers. I just don't think they're going to really mean anything.
I thought Christine was more talking, comparing, you know,
sample.
Like 2019, September, the first quarter, when we were in school full time, to this year.
Oh,
September,
I
first
thought you
quarter.
were just looking for, all right, maybe I'm misunderstanding. I guess, I mean, I think everyone realizes overall the kids are not doing as well this year as they were when they were in school. I mean, being in school is better to learn than being remote. There obviously are kids that are going to thrive, but I think overall, kids do better when they're actually in school. I don't think anyone can argue with that.
No, absolutely not. And that's the reason we're having this meeting tonight, to try to get our K-5 back. I just don't know at the end of the day, if we go through the work to do that, what the payoff is going to be. I think everyone in the community, and not everyone, most people in the community and in the district agree that we need our people back in person. And even so, we do have some students who are doing well remotely, they still need to be back in the classroom. So at the end of the day, I'm not really sure what the payoff would be.
And Mrs. Webb, I just wanted to say your comment about, you know, questioning and going with, you know, what the majority of the parents want. Just because we're asking questions doesn't mean we're against or for. We're just asking questions to clarify things, I think is more, at least my point. I'm just trying to clarify things for everyone in the community.
Ray May.
Yes, ma'am. Hi, guys. Thank you.
Hi.
So as a staff member, I am completely gung-ho for this. I think all of you have amazing ideas, and I think this is, I'm ready. I am beyond ready. But as a parent, now you were saying that we're not going to bring back middle school, high school because they changed classrooms, but yet the numbers over there are smaller. So that was my concern there.
Okay, Ms. Mesa, so the question is,
Why didn't we go with that original as far as doing like certain grade levels March 1st, another set of grade levels March 15th versus doing one building and then another and then another?
the simple reason is, like we said earlier, the movement in the middle school and the high school is much more than it is in the elementary school. The only school that I'm aware of right now that's actually bringing back middle school and high school is UE. I'm not, maybe ME is as well, but we thought if we could bring back K-5 and get that cemented back in, we would have a little bit more time, Mr. Rulo, myself, and Mr. Daniels, to work on our plan for middle school and high school. And again, it's the movement in those buildings that makes us nervous. It's the movement between classes. In the elementary, a student will have one shield all day long in a classroom. In the middle school and high school, when they switch classrooms, we're gonna have to find a way to clean those shields in between, because they're gonna be used by different students. It's just gonna take more work at the middle school and high school level to pull this off if we can do it. Well, like,
okay,
that's the reason, even so it's smaller, that movement really comes into play. One student, again, look at Mr. Rillo. Mr. Rillo's in 7th grade, and he sees 5 different teachers, and he could actually, if he has COVID, he could actually take out those 5 teachers. And it's happened. We've shut down our 8th grade, what, Mr. Rillo, now twice? We've had to shut down the entire 8th grade. So it's just a little bit different at those grade levels. I'm not saying we can't do it. I think if we can bring back K-5 right now, get those elementary kids back 4 days a week, Mr. Daniels, Mr. Rillo, and I will have more time to look and dissect the plan for the middle school and high school to try to bring those students back before the end of the year.
so the original plan of the kids having to carry around a shield, that's no longer.
We just, again, we come up with so many different plans, and then we think, we talk, we look, we actually walked down the hallway. Mr. Daniels will tell you, we were stuffing shields in lockers today. We were putting them on desks. We were dropping them on the floor to see if they're, I mean, we're literally, we try to be the students and see what can and can't go wrong. And you got your computer, you have your backpack, you have your lunch, you have your jacket, you have all these other things. Kids sometimes don't like to use lockers. And now we're telling them they need to carry a shield around. And then they got to take it home. They got to bring it back. And these shields are not that durable. We just, at the end of the day, did not think it would be feasible for our middle school and high school kids to do that. And again, I know middle school kids. I know high school kids. You're walking down the hall, you see your buddy and decide you're going to slap them with the screen you're carrying. I mean, you know, they're kids, you know, they're still, you know, in middle school and high school. So putting those shields in their hands, we didn't think at the end of the day. First glance, we thought, yeah, great, they can carry them. And then as we thought, we talked, and we do a lot of talking, a lot of reflecting, and a lot of demonstrating, like I just said. And we thought at the end of the day that carrying the shields just didn't make sense.
I thank you for that, because I wasn't sure how it was going to work either. Me being the parent of 2 middle school students, I was just envisioning chaos, especially groups of kids walking from class to class carrying said shield, and you know, potentially it could break, and then the said student would be without one. Or
I can tell you, Miss May, that the community and the board seldom gets our first idea. They usually get our 7th or 8th idea presented, because we try to go through and break down all those things on our own. And we have a small admin team. It's Mrs. Kazavinsky, Mr. Rulo, Mr. Daniels, Mr. McDermott, Mrs. Elwin is there, and Mr. Hogan. And again, we're not as large as some schools, and sometimes more is better, but we do our best to try to think of all the scenarios. And again, I said in a previous meeting, at one point, we actually, in our fall reopening plan, we had K-5 coming back 4 days a week, but it kicked our high school kids fully remote. So we probably wrote, and my admin can shake their head yes or no, we probably revised our reentry plan back in the fall 10, 12, 13 times. We'd get to a certain point and then we'd go, oh, can't do it because of this. And then we'd have to backtrack and redo it. So what you're getting as the public and the school board is definitely not our first thoughts. And again, we continuously look at this almost on a daily, if not at least every other day basis.
Can I jump in real quick? And forgive me if I asked this already. Is there, for the middle school and the high school, could they wear individual face shields in tandem with their mask?
We looked at that too, Mrs. O'Brien, and that's just not feasible. Those are uncomfortable. They're pretty standard to one size. Our kids' faces all over from 6th grade to 12 are very different. And that's something that we actually did talk about. And at the end of the day, those face shields, they really cover nothing. And we just did not feel comfortable with those.
But if you're in compliance, you know what I'm saying? If it makes us in compliance, allows the students to come back. Because if we're going to start, you know, and I mean this respectfully, picking apart what actually works, what actually doesn't, you know, that brings us back to square one for the elementary. So I
know we talked about those, and Mr. Daniels actually modeled one while we were talking about those. Would you like to talk about how comfortable those are, Mr. Daniels, and what we believe the odds of our kids keeping those on for a full day are?
They're very uncomfortable, and I would bet that we'd have a number of students choosing to go remote rather than wear those things all day long.
Okay, thank you.
We did look at it. We did try them on. We did try it. I looked at it this way, Mrs. O'Brien. If we adults couldn't do it, I can't ask a 6th grader to do it.
Okay. Linda Roby.
Okay, I had to promote you to panelist for now in order for you to be able to speak on here, Mrs. Roby. So go ahead.
Why don't we go on to Jessica Beadle, and then we'll come back to Mrs. Roby.
You just need to unmute yourself, Mrs. Beadle.
Hi, thank you.
Hi,
So I
good
have
evening.
two things. Mr. D'Amatos, in response to Ms. Webb's one question about the data You stated that it's clear that students aren't doing as well with the current learning model. So why are we even questioning returning our students to in-person learning? My second issue is with regards to the wearable face shields. I'm thankful that none of you work in healthcare, as I do. I've had to wear one for a year almost. They're really not as uncomfortable as you indicated they are. They do come in different varieties and sizes to accommodate for different face sizes and shapes. So I think this is really an option that could be looked at for the older students.
Mr. DeMoss, do you want to take that first question? I'll take the second one.
Yeah, I mean, basically, my issue all along, and I know there's a lot of different politics, and I don't want to get into that, but there's a lot of different people that have different opinions on COVID and everything else, and that's not my experience with COVID. Isn't the COVID, but it's the quarantine. And I've said this before: the quarantine is house arrest, and any household that has gone through quarantine multiple times knows how. I mean, it's a lockdown. If you don't cheat. Okay, and I know there's people who ignore it and do what they want. But if you're a household that does the quarantine the way you're supposed to, it's a big deal. It affects your life, and it affects your life for weeks. My household has been locked down. My daughter is currently locked down at college, which is kind of disturbing to me. The numbers at Brockport, I know this firsthand, they're exploding. The numbers at SUNY Binghamton, they just canceled their sports. It was on Channel 12 yesterday. So I'm a little nervous. If this meeting happened last week, I'd have a much different feeling on it. And this is probably the only time I haven't made up my mind. I don't really know where I'm going with this, because I want the kids back. I want business as usual in everywhere. But at the same time, I'm nervous. And I'm nervous that bringing the kids back too soon is going to cause a spike. It's going to cause quarantines. It's going to disrupt more people's lives. So that's pretty much where I'm coming from with this. Is it better to have the kids in school? Absolutely. My wife's a teacher. I know how it is. I see my daughter, she kills herself to maintain her grades. It's so much work being at home. And I know every kid, isn't as motivated. Kids have different levels of motivation. Some kids, absolutely, there are kids that are thriving in it, but I don't think most do. I think most kids lack the discipline to put the time into it. And then when you get into the elementary school, you can't expect, elementary kids need to be in person. But at the same time, I mean, parents want their kids in school, but all of a sudden, if their kid gets COVID, I mean, do they realize that, 10 days, 2 weeks of the household being quarantined? I don't know until you experience it how much it happened. And I know there are people who have experienced it, but I think a lot of people haven't. And I don't know if they realize what goes on. And that's where I'm really struggling. Again, it's not so much the virus for me, it's the quarantine, it's the lockdown, it's the house arrest. I think that's what I called it before. So that's where I'm coming from.
And as far as the shields go, the face shields, we'll continue to look at them, but an adult wearing them, again, it's much different than a child wearing them. We would have to delve into the cost of the different sizes. We'd have to actually get fittings almost to the different sizes. Because like I said, look at our middle school and high school kids, very different. We have some very small high schoolers. We have some very big middle schoolers. So at this point, and we have talked about the face shields, we just don't think they're viable at this point. And that's the stance I'm going to have to stand on, because again, we've discussed it, and that's where we're at this point.
We have gone over 30 minutes, so it would be up to the board if they'd like to continue with public comment.
I don't want to, I'll speak first. Because we have gone so far over, I want to give the remaining few here the chance to speak, those who have not spoken, and not have second and third comments at this moment. What does the rest of the board feel? Okay, I don't hear anybody, so Spiros is giving me a thumb up. Mike?
I'm fine with anyone who hasn't spoken yet.
So Amy, you need a motion to extend executive session over 30 minutes then.
I make a motion upon recommendation of the Board of Education, a motion to extend public comment.
Motion.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 We'll wait for Mary.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay. All right, I'll go to the people who have not yet spoken.
Okay, thank you.
Mary M.
Yes, good evening. I just can't let the meeting end without a teacher voice being heard. So I will speak. I just want to make a few points. I'm not a medical professional, but I did listen to our medical professionals at the last meeting, and I read a lot. And I just want to say that it's very clear from research that the barriers are not effective against the microscopic aerosols. They stop the bigger aerosols, but not the microscopic aerosols. And there's also huge effectiveness factors between one mask and another. So some of our students are wearing, 2-3 layer masks, and others are wearing less effective 1-layer masks. So in reality, in 4th and 5th grade classrooms with the numbers that we have of 22 to 24 students and up to 4 adults, as in my classroom at any given time, which for me for my particular situation, makes 26 people in my room. And it's not about me, it's just giving an example of what reality looks like. There'll only be really a few feet at most between desks, between students. And to contrast that, districts that have made changes in the summer, they moved, as was stated tonight, like SV, they moved teachers, they moved grade levels to different buildings. I was just wondering, Mr. Vavra, if you'd be willing to share the number of students in a 5th grade SV classroom?
I am, the 5th grade is at the middle school. I believe they have anywhere from 16 to 20 kids in there.
Okay.
But the 5th grade and the 4th grade are in the science wing of the middle school, which the classrooms are much bigger. There are labs in there, so they're way more spread out, but I don't think there's more than 18, 20 kids in them. I even think there's 18 is probably the limit there.
But it's a very large classroom.
Yes.
Okay, so just to make that point, if we're comparing ourselves to other districts, I think we need to remember that those districts made these plans over the summer, and that they moved teachers, and that they moved entire classrooms, entire grade levels. So this is a much different situation for Chenango Forks. And also in the crowded hallways, the changing for specials, kids won't have barriers, and they'll have either effective or ineffective masks. So that could cause spread. And really the rest of my points have already been made by various board members. And I would like to thank you all for really taking this seriously and considering everyone involved, and all the different factors that go into it, and really giving it serious thought, because it is a serious situation. I do just have one final question. Has the idea of waiting until after spring break been completely rejected, or maybe even the end of the second trimester? Has that been completely rejected to give us a little bit more time to make this transition?
Mary, we looked at that and we just felt that we're pushing it out too far at that point. We're literally pushing it out another 5 weeks. And that's why we decided that March 15th would be a date to come back. That'd give us, I believe, 3 weeks before spring break actually occurred. Then we have spring break and possibly the week after. So that's one reason that we decided to do it with that date. Just if we keep pushing it out, after a while, if we're going to spend the money to bring them back, it's not going to be cost effective. If we're going to do it, we thought that March would be the time to do it.
Okay, thank you.
Jody Harding.
Hi there. Thank you guys for taking the time today to speak to everyone. I have COVID fatigue as much as everybody else does, and wants my kids to go back too. But I think a big element of this being successful is not only what the school can do and the resources that they can provide in terms of shields and the the glasses in between the kids, but also what the community members are doing themselves, because we are dependent on, are they going and what types of gatherings are they having? Because they all bring this back to the school, and it essentially impacts everything. And you're making a decision really that, could potentially affect the lives of other people. I think with the vaccines rolling out, those that want the vaccines, I feel like they should have the opportunity to have them, and be effectively immunized before maybe we come back. I know it's not the favorable thing to say. This is a hard decision, but just a couple thoughts.
Thank you for those thoughts. I think we're gonna take a couple more questions and then that's going to be it.
Yep, we have Melinda Sherman.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for holding this meeting. I really appreciate your willingness to consider what's possibly best for our children, and I understand everybody's fears. I just wanted to make a couple comments, regarding the colleges. Absolutely, everybody is so, worn down by the fact that the numbers are spiking again. But like Dr. Peck said, it is different with college students than it is with elementary students. I have a 9-year-old who's in 4th grade. She doesn't often go out to party most evenings, and I get to control where she is and what environment she is. And I know that a lot of parents are also being very cautious about their children's interactions as well. And another comment I wanted to make is that, everybody's talking about the possibility of putting it off. And I kind of agree that the longer we put it off, it's just going to keep causing everybody, more fear, more concern. Ripping off the Band-Aid sounds like a great idea in my eyes, just because of the fact that, we are concerned, but at this point, our numbers in the past month in Binghamton have almost halved. I know that I work in one of our local hospitals, and our numbers have, we almost cheer because our numbers are starting to go down in our area. So I think that although it is scary, now might be the best time to do this for our children, because on top of their educational needs, a lot of kids are really suffering mentally from this. And I'm grateful for the opportunity that my child might not have to continue to deal with the emotional stresses of being home.
Thank you, Ms. Sherman, for those comments. I appreciate it. Maybe I shouldn't use the term ripping off the Band-Aid. That's not really what I meant, but sometimes it's hard to think on your feet. And I think we just want to go back all at once and see if we can't get this done. And again, going back to what I said to Mary Ann, if we brought back K1, then 2, 3, then 4, 5, then we're just kicking the can down the road of bringing back the grades. So doing it all at once, I think, was just probably the most sensible thing to do.
Okay, our last speaker will be Kirsten Brennan. Okay, you're on, Mrs. Brennan. Okay, I think there was a message that hers was an older version of Zoom, so I don't think it's going to be able to work this way.
Okay, I think we're gonna have to end. Oh, is she there? I thought I heard something.
Nope, I think that's it.
Okay, so we're gonna end public comment. I do welcome emails if she would like to share her comment that way. Okay. All right, 3.1. Upon recommendation of the superintendent, a resolution upon a resolution upon recommendation of the superintendent of schools that the reopening plan to return K through 5 students back to in-person instruction 4 days per week beginning March 15th, 2021 be approved. May I have a motion, please?
Motion.
Thank you, Mike.
Second.
Thank you, Mary. Discussion? I think we've exhausted our discussion for this for tonight. Roll call, please.
Amy O'Brien,
Aye.
Spiros Tomatoes. I'm sorry, I missed it.
I didn't vote.
Oh, okay.
I can't, I'm gonna abstain, and I just gotta say, I ultimately, the decision is up to the parent, but I can't in good conscience vote yes, but I'm not gonna vote no either. Ultimately, everybody has the decision to send their kids to school or not, and that's the thing. So I'm gonna abstain from this vote. And I'm sorry, I don't mean this to be chickening out, but I'm just so torn on this issue. I just can't. Sorry.
Mary Collins,
Aye.
Michael Vavra,
100% yes.
and Lynn Lockwood.
Motion has passed. K through 5 will resume in person 4 days a week, beginning March 15th. Okay, we are going to jump back up to board report. I just wanted to, so I'm sure all the board members and the superintendent would agree that we have received a flood of emails. And I just wanted to reiterate where those communications go. And the reason I'm bringing this up is, for example, if somebody fills out the contact form for the board, sometimes it'll be addressed to Dr. Peck and the board. And I just wanted people to fully understand that when you fill out the contact us form under the board, you are contacting the 5 board members. If you wish to contact just the superintendent, you contact the superintendent. If you wish to contact both, it's 2 separate emails, unless you don't use the contact us form and type it in. So I just wanted people to realize that contact the board contacts the 5 board members. I want to make sure nobody's communication is being missed by anyone they believe they're sending it to. One more thing. In an effort to work toward more effective communication, I would like to take a moment to address a statement I made at our last board meeting. When I stated we are not maintaining quality, it seems what I meant by that was misunderstood by some of the faculty and community. I want to clarify. My statement was not directed at the faculty or the quality of their teaching, but is the result of our current learning model we have been forced into. If you think of a school as a business, then our product would be a quality education. Currently, we are not providing the quality education that we were providing when we were in person. Due to many factors such as technology, environment, and in-person assistance, once again, that is not directed at our teachers or our students, but the circumstances we are in, which is why I feel strongly that we need to bring these kids back to school. Additionally, I absolutely recognize our teachers are performing to their very best of their abilities and have had to learn this new way of teaching as they go. I could not be more grateful for those who have persevered through. Thank you. In the future, if you have been negatively affected by a statement, please reach out and seek clarification from the source. I appreciate the grace, but also the opportunity to clear up potential misunderstanding. It is said that children learn in 3 ways: by example, and by example. Let us be an example to our children by giving one another the benefit of the doubt before resorting to social media platforms. We are on the same side, the side that wants to provide a quality education to our students. That's all I wanted to share. Thank you. 4.1, a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion.
Thank you, Mike.
Second.
Thank you, Lynn. Discussion and roll call.
Amy O'Brien,
Aye.
Spiros Tomatoes,
Aye.
Mary Collins,
Aye.
Michael Vavra,
Aye.
and Lynn Lockwood.
Aye.
Motion passed. Have a good night, everyone.